Jacksonville, the child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
The week that was on the first day of December 2016 from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. And I guess we'll do a double and coming to you via the latest app or on your desktop computer. From Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Twitter, YouTube, Spreaker, and many other outlets there. We're also in the Internet Archives. You can find us there. Also, the RSS feed that is being looked at and upgraded as a conference. PRI has a conference on that particular issue. We'll get that in on the Monday Morning Quarterback on Monday morning. Incidentally, on this episode, we'll talk a little about Mayor Petey out of South Bend, Indiana, and his effect on the race. There was a Washington Post article. We'll coalesce around it. Suburban Republicans that can't stand DJ Trump and what effect that will have on the race. But firstly, an unfortunate situation, and this centers around much of the activity of conspiracy and conspiracy theorists. There is a person running in the upper Midwest state of Minnesota wanting to run against the progressive Congress woman, Ilhan Omar. Now, this person is named Danielle Styler. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Anyway, Styler alleges that Congressman Omar colluding with Qatar and several other Arab countries, passing information to them. That is one of the conspiracy theories that has obviously been debunked. It's part of the big lie scenario, Goebbels-like situation. But there she's talking about Ilhan Omar should be hung, lynched. And of course that account is on suspension and it should disappear. But this is a larger problem that has been cropping itself up since the birth certificate issue, the birthers movement with the former president Barack Obama. And that was allowed again to get out of control. The problem with these conspiracies and the conspiracy theories, they feel nothing more than just old-fashioned hate. And to deal with old-fashioned hate, there needs to be action that is sanctioned by the Central Violence regime, and that is governmental action. That's the centralized violence power. That has to be, you have to have anti-hate laws. Now, some people would say, well, perhaps something the direct opposite of love. No, love can do nothing for these people. We don't get into morality here or that sort of thing. But based upon so-called common morality, Dr. King wrote about that, the community of love. And the reason that Dr. King did that was he was outgunned and outnumbered in the South. So therefore he had to use that stratagem. But today that is not really a stratagem. You do not confront hate with love. You confront hate with action. And the Twitter suspension of that account and their use in increased use of machine learning, algorithms, etc., to pull off those people off of Twitter. What they have not been able to deal with the number one offender, and that character sits in the White House in the form of DJ Trump president. Now, he has been on Twitter maligning people. In fact, he attacked Congressman Omar and the other progressive congressman, saying that they should go back where they came from. No one in America should ever be asked to go back where they came from, period. Because America is a melting pot, always has been a melting pot of people from various countries. In fact, the ethnic heritage of the little Mia from South Bend is Maltese. Now, I don't know how long his lineage has been in South Bend, and his parents are academics. But anyway, nonetheless, many people, second generation, Henry Kissinger comes to mind, a German immigrant escaping the Nazis. Of course, he's in his 90s now. But this whole situation is that the use of social media apps like Twitter to fan the flames of hate is counterproductive. Of course, we know from the field of science that hate is a negative thought, obviously. And positives overcome negatives. And of course, the centralized violence power used by the state can overcome that. That is to properly regulate and address through legislation the social media, particularly Facebook. Now, of course, Facebook is a cohort of the Mia from South Bend, but beyond that, Facebook has discriminated against people. Not only that, they have sponsored ads by that lunatic out of Austin Jones and various other loonies out there that they have allowed them to flourish. And that has also been on YouTube. And now they have taken down some people deservingly so, some people not deservingly so, for various offenses of what they call their rules of acceptance, their policies. But those policies, depending on which one, Facebook, we have been accosted for just retweeting, resending someone else's post, not our post, but, and then of course, because normally when we are there, and we're not there that much, we will be liking and, as they call it, sharing several posts within a combined period. And we've had that, and of course went back. But even the H's posts, they have censored those that we're just simply sharing. It's not our original posts. These posts primarily, and they all come from quote-unquote corporate media. They're from the Washington Post, the Times, the Daily World, publications of that nature. Anyway, nonetheless, that is kind of the story of why this cesspool has been created. And we've talked on this program, this platform, about the origins of so-called negative campaigning. And that feeds to a portion of the population that is engulfed in that kind of negative activity that Hillary Clinton talked about them in terms of who some of these people were, deplorables. But it's beyond that from a social psychological point of view, that these people see themselves as, and now this is obviously not all of the people, but the people that follow and propagate the conspiracy theories are addressing to, are they themselves see as the American society, particularly the economic engines, is passing them by, or are about to pass them by. Not only economic engine, it could be the political, but primarily the social type of situation. So they are drawn to some kind of theory that is bigger than them, because in reality they see themselves as losers in this society. Now that is a form of quote-unquote self-hate. We call it projection in psychology, but that is part of some people and their attitudes there, depending on where they are in the scheme of things, a complicated society. So thus they encompass ragged American individualism, but these people are different in that they may be purport to be individualistic, but basically they are followers of whomever, whatever. They are not the kinds of people that go to the outback, build a log cabin, and just live out there. Period. Or, for the most part, they're not entrepreneurs that go out and seek their fortune or whatever they might do. The majority of these people are employed by whatever enterprise, or have been employed by whatever enterprise, and that is where they are. And they would tell you that yes, they are very individualistic, but then when under further investigation, they are not. They are followers of, we'll say for instance, some mega ministry, or they are followers of whatever crackpot comes down the proverbial highway, or they are interested in various quacky cures. All these things play into the what they call sea of quackery. So thus this Danielle Straya is one of those types of people, because if you listen to her commentary, she talks about, this is normally what the Lord would do. What she's talking about, that people that are convicted of treason, spying, treason, can get up to life imprisonment, and at some issues they used to get death. But that's back to the Rosenberg case. Now this has some history, and this is part of the problem that you have with these kinds of people. They do not know their history, period. And they do not want to know their history. Why? Because their history turns them into fools, ignoramuses, idiots, dummies. And the people that are leading these characters know that. So thus they just tell them, you discount the history, or if there's any history there. In places like Texas, they've even taken Dr. King out of the textbooks. This is for high schoolers. So if they ignore their history and say, well, that was just faked anyway, they can move on with present. Now that's where there's an interesting situation here. They're dealing with present, but they're really not looking to future, because they know, as the old, what was the Barry Goldwater thing in their heart, that they virtually have no future, depending obviously on their age. Now people that are in their late 60s, 70s, and 80s, they don't have to worry about that as a great equalizer there. But for younger people, and people say in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, they understand this. Even the reactionary Republican Party understands that demographics is against them. So what do? They come out with a lot of authoritarian rules, voter suppression, and that has not been talked about enough. We hear the protection of the ballot. Yes, that is there. Paper ballots. I remember at Cranston where we got a ton of information. That was when there was a RSVP to build a voting machine. a company named DeBolt out of Omaha. I believe that's where they were out of. They're no longer in business, but they were the ones that had a lot of ATMs running around. So they built voting machines. Now there are all kinds of companies. I think Sequoia is one that are building these machines. Jill Stein is now in a lawsuit in Pennsylvania. She didn't get a recount there, but the state settled with her. They're in some areas there, and the voting machines they are using are the types that do not have the paper trail, and they're highly vulnerable. Now, if you go back in the history, now I'm talking about, I'll say something that we couldn't prove, but we do have evidence. Well, in one case, this was in Ohio, with brother John Kerry, and the Secretary of State there was Blackwell, an African-American, a stoolie, but nonetheless, they were able to, through his machinery, manipulate Ohio. Thus, John Kerry lost the race. Now, in Florida, it was just old-fashioned steal a ballot box, and when you get down to 500 and something votes, and then the Supreme Court confirmed it and stopped the recount. That was in Florida, and Albert Gore of Tennessee lost the race to G.W. Bush of Dallas. And that is one of the instances they just stole the ballot box paper. These were paper ballot boxes that happened. So don't get over enthusiastic about Russian crimes there, and the Russians, and then what another thing, but maybe the Ukrainians did it. Well, maybe Mickey Mouse did it. It doesn't matter too much who formulated a stratagem or got the money together. Let's go to the problem. The problem was, where did they buy the ads from? Well, it was Facebook. So that's your problem. Deal with Facebook. And if you deal with Facebook, you will erase some of the problem. We'll get back to old-fashioned politics. Now, that will not preclude the William Horton ads and those sort of things. Those sort of things will be out there. But that was a different type of targeted ad there. But what it will do is cut down on the snake oil salesman, conspiracy theories. You don't hear, in our Thanksgiving program, we highlighted the 2010 race in the state of Delaware. In fact, it was to replace Joe Lunchbox Biden. And someone ran there named Christine O'Donnell. Well, her rhetoric was somewhat close to this Danielle Stella. It's the same old cooker, so to speak. It's the same kind of situation. There is honestly no difference in it. So we'll deal with that. Let's now go to other subjects here. That was based upon current news. Incidentally, in Malta itself, the Prime Minister there is connected with a crook that killed Daphne Career, whatever her name was, a journalist, investigative journalist, and she had looked at the Panama Papers and found something called 16 Black, a company. It says offshore activities world globally with the cronies of the Prime Minister, business associates. One of the richest person in Malta is now in jail. So some of the things going on. Then over the weekend we had a situation in London. A former criminal terrorist type was attending, of all things, a conference that brought together criminologists, etc., and former convicts. So during the conference, after the conference, he went out and stabbed some people, injured 3, killed 2, ran out towards London Bridge, and some people were able to get him and get the knife away from him, and then the what they call the armed police came and they killed him. But the issue was of how he got out of jail there, and Boris Johnson, the Tory or conservative government, is trying to explain that. John Johnson, well on the law at the time, this is 10 years ago. It was a different type of law, and it provided, as it does in this country, that you can get, I believe he served 8 years of his sentence and not the full sentence. Well, that happens here. They have different laws. But the problem was there, the supervisory organization, the corrections, supervision, paroles, etc., had received redundancy or layoff notices, so they did not have enough personnel to supervise the people. And the labor candidate, Jeremy Coleman, made a very clear statement. He's always said this, that criminals that are violent like this character, he was 28 years old, should not be on early release, period. And there are ways of supervising these people properly. He supposedly had a transmitter on him. His internet access was limited, etc., etc. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, somebody as high profile as he had been convicted of trying to blow up the London Stock Exchange and several other things. Now, we don't know literally the background of this individual whom he was associated with. It's very, very tricky there because, again, he may have been believed to be associated with people that represented certain groups, but in reality he was associated with people that represented the British intelligence services. So this is where that particular situation is in the air. Skipping back to the U.S. here, we have the House Judiciary Committee, the impeachment required moves to them, and they will have some hearings, and the Intelligence Committee will be, of course, writing their report. Anyway, on to other things here. Let's see if we can get this situation up here on the mayor from South Bend. We made some preliminary comments on that, and this is from the Washington Post. This is not our content. This is, I'll give the headline here. Mayor Pete said being gay helps him relate to the black struggle. Some reject that notion. That's the headline here. Picture of Mayor Pete and the national leader, Dr. Al Sharpton. This is by Robert Samuels and Isaac Stanley Beaker and Chelsea Jane. Anyway, this was on the 27th of November. Mayor Pete has delivered a provocative response in recent days to those who challenge his empathy with African Americans. His experience as a gay man helps him relate to the struggle of African Americans. That has angered some African Americans who view this as an attempt by a privileged European man to claim a type of victimhood that is distinct from the quote-unquote black experience in America, even while others take the comment more favorably. So it's a fairly balanced article. Oliver Davis, a African-American city council type member in South Bend, where the Buttigieg is the mayor, said that African-Americans, unlike gay people, don't have the option of coming out at their chosen moment, as did Buttigieg, who disclosed his sexual orientation after he had been elected mayor. Now that's a very interesting point. We did not know that. When you see me, you know that I'm an African American from day one, Davis said, who has endorsed Joe Lunchbox Biden. When someone is gay or lesbian, unless they tell you or they are seen in certain situations, then no one is going to know that, nor should they care. They are able to build their resumes and build their careers. No doubt. LGBT activists, something different in Buttigieg, a barrier breaker from a group that has long faced bigotry and violence, a face of the latest struggle for inclusion. While some successfully conceal their differences, say leaders of the movement for gay equality, that decisions have come with its own steep costs. Woodson, the founder of Freedom to Marry, which helped lead the fight for same-sex marriage, says Buttigieg's message is not an attempt to appropriate someone else's experience, but rather, he says, the mayor is saying that because he too has had to deal with his own struggle that made him more aware that he may have more aware of the need to connect with the struggles of others. Well, we don't debate that one. That question, how to square Buttigieg's privilege with the adversity that comes with anti-gay prejudice. is becoming sharper as the 37-year-old Afghan war veteran rises in the polls and scrambles for ways to connect with African American voters. What's interesting here, they favorably, the Washington Post, their editors, put him down as a 37-year-old Afghan war veteran. In fact, he was an intelligence officer with the Reserve, I believe is what his case was, and he was in Afghanistan. I forget how long he was in Afghanistan, not very long. But he was an intelligence officer, not that he was out chasing bullets. And it renews the issue of how Americans of any background would respond to a candidacy of an open gay man one who holds hands with his husband and publicly discuss his decision to come out. The debates are unfolding against a significant shift in politics of identity. The Me Too and Black Lives Movement continue to resonate, and the successful push for marriage equality hardly marks the culmination of the quest for a full set of LGBT rights. As President Trump inflames the America's divide, the Democratic Party is fielding the most diverse set of presidential candidates in history. Not sure about that. If we go back to Shirley Chisholm and Jesse Jackson, and of course Dr. Sharpton actually ran for president also. Buttigieg has shot to the top of the polls in Iowa and has gained strength in New Hampshire, two largely European states, but he has trailed badly. Of course, many candidates are trading badly in South Carolina, the first primary state with a significant African American population, no doubt about it. South Carolina, the Democratic Party there is made up of followers of O.J. Simpson. Recent poll gave him less than 1% of African American Democrats there. The mayor's current efforts to find common ground are prompting raw feelings, including his comment at the last Democratic debate when the race question arose. While I do not have the experience of ever having been discriminated against because of the color of my skin, and in America that is the full Monty. I do have the experience of sometimes feeling like a stranger in my own country. He took that from the book. Turning on the news and seeing my own rights coming up for debate, seeing my rights expanded by a coalition of people like me and people not all like me. That drew a sharp response from Senator Harris of California, presidential hopeful, and the only African woman in the U.S. Senate. What he did on stage is just not productive. I think it is a bit naive, she told CNN after the debate. Well, that charge has come up before. Only African Americans agree, feeling that Buttigieg, is implicitly comparing his experience to the unique struggle of African Americans in a misguided effort to show his empathy. I think Carmela has a point, and I understand that what she was saying. That's from Dr. Al Sharpton, the national leader. In the interview, though he added Buttigieg has been misunderstood. He said Buttigieg is doing his best to reach out. He is evolving. So are babies. Do I think he's where he needs to be? No. The big question is, will he ever get an opportunity to get there? The prospects of tension between African Americans and gay communities worry some people in both groups. Can't you all just stop this mess? That is from Alvin McGuinn, a LGP, an African American from South Carolina, thinking to himself amidst a flurry of following Buttigieg's comments. No group wants to have the autonomy of their narrative taken by another group. That is what McGuinn said, and it also typifies how both communities want to grab onto the power and don't want to listen to the other. Well, you're always going to have these rivalries, I guess if that's how he wants to put it. Asked about the comments during his recent campaign swing in western Iowa, Mayor Pete said he was not trying to compare the African American and gay experiences, but only to say that he's driven to fight for African Americans the way others have fought for him. No doubt about that. Civil rights. It was people like me and people not like me who came together and started before I was born, throughout my lifetime, who have made it possible for things like my marriage to exist, and honestly for someone like me to even be taken seriously as a candidate for president. Having seen that, and having seen how that alliance can make an impact and make me reflect on how I can turn around and make myself useful not only to the LGBT community, but to people whose life experience are very different. That resonates with many in the gay rights community. Matt Foreman, he's program director of Evelyn and Walter Haas Jr. Fund, which advocates for marriage equality and amongst other causes. He said it's not given that being gay gives someone greater empathy for the struggle of people of color, no doubt. But it should, he said, it can't be the same, because you can never get inside someone else's skin. What they're doing here is individualizing this whole matter, and it is a societal matter, not an individual matter, and that is where Mayor Petey has fallen off the track. But I see that a lot of LGBT organizations and their sincere commitment to helping address systematic racism, forming knowledge that LGBT groups have sometimes fallen short. We, as members of the gay movement, have often failed to appreciate the need to be there for other communities. No doubt about that, citing police shootings, which sometimes prompt an outcry amongst gay activists, and other times a reaction that this isn't our issue. Whoopson of Freedom to Marry, and now defunct, attained its goal, is unhappy with Buttigieg amongst many. Said the unhappiness with Buttigieg amongst many African American voters, including in his hometown of South Bend, illustrates that the mayor undoubtedly has more work to be done. Well, yeah, but again, we'll get to that when we finish this article. According to these challenges, Buttigieg was forced to respond recently to a harshly worded article in the African American oriented Root. Now, Root is owned by the Washington Post, which denounced Buttigieg's comments a year ago that part of black students' problem is a lack of successful role models. The author, Michael Harriet, called Buttigieg a liar for omitting the role of systematic racism there. And more of these things are going to come out there. On Tuesday, called Harriet to explain his remarks and listen to his critics' review. And when a voter asked Mayor Pete about the article at town meeting, and this was in Sioux City, Iowa, the candidate said the author had been right, adding that we've got to look at structural factors, I guess he's calling systematic racism, that drive different racial outcomes in our country. He cited his Douglas plan, which is a scam, named after for tracking institutionalized racism, the proposal for sweeping change in health care, education, employment, and criminal justice. As an ongoing part of his outreach, he plans to worship at the Greenleaf Christian Church, that's in Goldsboro, North Carolina. That is led by the Reverend Dr. William Barber II, as a well-known minister, of course, to the Poor People's Campaign. Barber said in the interview, today's polarized climate, candidates are often surprised to find so much diversity in this church. Blacks, whites, gays, and lesbians, they've got them all in the church, I guess. Let's not get caught up in this, in who is understanding discrimination the most, he said. Let's deal with the real issues. I agree with Dr. Barber on that, which is that the same entities that are against gay folk are the same entities who are against black folk, and we're going to have to unite in fighting discrimination in any form of it. Now, at the outset, and this character's he's been to see Jimmy Carter and everybody else. His camp sought guidance how to frame his gay identity with talking with African American voters. 2 weeks after announcing his run, he lunched with Dr. Sharpton at Sylvia's, the famous restaurant in Harlem. Our news director, L.A. Bill Graham, lunched there all the time. He wanted to genuinely know how I felt the African American community react to a LGBT candidate. Sharpton said the activist told something other African American leaders have also said. The level of homophobia in the African American community has been greatly overstated. Like Evans said, it's clear why some African American voters are hesitant to support the mayor, noting that many of his qualifications are shared by a female candidate or a person of color, yet have received less buzz. And Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota pointed that out. He served in the military, but so did Tulsi Gabbard. In fact, she was actually in a medical company there. He made a name in local politics, but so did Amy Klobuchar. I think the fact that a European male is so far a bigger problem than being a gay amongst blacks in South Carolina, Mickey Evans said, because of the white male power structure, he's gotten a lot more attention than people who are senators. He is the only mayor, and not only that, he's a mayor of a one-horse town, period. So that in itself, and this goes back to framing and his relationship with Facebook. Beyond that, African American voters give various reasons for distrusting the mayor, including his handle of race relations in South Bend. But a recurring theme is the sense that he benefits from a privileged status without recognizing that he enjoys those advantages. Well, working class Amy Klobuchar has said that. He denies that, saying he is well aware of his advantages. This week he pledged increased engagement and new forms of engagement. That's not going to help him any. He also said his challenge with African American voters is that a few know him, but his detractors say they know exactly who he is. He's well-intentioned white liberal who credits himself with more insight into the African American predicament than he has. He gets to be cast as an all-American boy in the race, as if black people can't be all-American. That is what McGuinn said. Can you imagine if he were black and gay? Good Lord, it would be a miracle that someone would vote for him. There's no doubt about that. And the key to understanding Mayor Petey and evaluating Mayor Petey is just simply his platform. He came out the other day with some scheme, including a 401k option. Well, the 401k option was championed by no other than the former speaker from Wisconsin. He was one of those people. There have been numerous Republicans around that have came up with the same scheme. The Republicans have always wanted to turn the Social Security system into a much-touted private pension plan. That was tried in Chile. Now they're trying to get rid of it. That was the brainchild of Milton Friedman and some others that were able to introduce that in Chile. That was under the dictator Pinochet. But Pinochet is not here. So be very, very careful of this character. This character has denounced Medicare for all, naturally that. He's in the pay of Facebook. He is one of the candidates that is more, in terms of his policy, they're disguised as being quote-unquote liberal, but they're not. They are just middle-of-the-road policies. Ryan of Wisconsin, when he was leader of the House, Speaker, had the same scheme, this 401k scheme. The only problem with the 401k is, obviously, you can't join it at 55. But, however, if you do join it, the market can be up at 2,800. It could be down at 2,000 or even 1,500. And you lose everything. So that is the problem there. Now, these other schemes that he has are nothing more than just schemes on paper. Anyway, let's go to the other part of the presentation here. Suburban voters. We don't spend much time on Mayor Petey. And this is from the Los Angeles Times. Trump has turned the suburbs into a GOP disaster zone. Does that doom his re-election? A very good question to ask here. This is Mesa, Arizona. For decades there was an unvarying rhythm to life in American suburbia. Carpool in the morning, watch sports on the weekend, barbecues in the summer, and vote Republican in November. Then came President Trump. orderly subdivides and kid-friendly communities that ring the nation's cities that have become death traps for Republicans as college-educated, upper-middle-class women flee the party in droves. This is by, incidentally, Mark Barbeck, writing on the 29th of November, costing the Republicans its House majority and swapping the party's strength in state capitals and local governments nationwide. Siping, excuse me. The dramatic shift is also reshaping the 2020 presidential race, elevating Democratic hopes in traditional Republican strongholds like Georgia and Arizona, and forcing Trump to redouble efforts to boost rural turnout, and that is to offset defections who some fear may never vote Republican so long as he's on the ballot. And rural turnouts, as we saw in Louisiana, can only be boosted so far. The GOP has gone from defending conservative principles like free trade, muscular stance against Russia, well, that's more of a Democratic thing in North Korea, to defending Trump's latest tweet. That is, says Sanchez, she's a life coach, mother of 5 in a prosperous desert community. She's a distant relative of none other than Willard Romney. You remember him? He ran for president from Utah. Sanchez considers Trump reprehensible as a human being and the Republican Party morally bankrupt. I couldn't be part of it anymore, she said. As a result, at age 40, the newly registered independent is winning her first ever Democratic vote for president. In an email statement, a spokesman for the Trump campaign, Susan Matthews, said, "Over the next year, our robust Women for Trump will continue working to mobilize supporters across the country and share the president's record of success. The erosion of success amongst suburban women began during 2016. There was no doubt about that. Into 2018, the trend continued in recent off-year elections in the suburbs from Wichita, Kansas, to northern New Jersey, to DeSoto County, Mississippi. Democrats have won 2 of 3 gubernatorial contests. That's in Kentucky and in Louisiana, in part because of their strength in those Republican rebounds. Sentiment extended down the ballot as well. Outside of Philadelphia, Democrats took control in Delaware County for the first time since literally the Civil War. In suburban Virginia, just outside of D.C., the party won every state House seat in Fairfax County, a shift nearly on par with. It's amazing the change just a few years ago. This is Q Whitefield Ayers, a pollster who has spent a decade strategizing for Republican campaigns and causes. It's not in one place, it's everywhere, including Arizona. In 2018, Kristen Sinema, a congressperson from suburban Phoenix, became the first Democrat in 30 years to win in Arizona, a seat there. She ran as a centrist, focusing on bipartisan problem solving, a direct appeal to pragmatic suburban voters, and her success as a model for turning the state from red to blue. And she used to be a Green Party candidate, at least making Arizona competitive in a way it has not been. All electoral votes, Arizona is a bigger prize than Wisconsin. That is a Midwest background state both parties view as key to the election. The Grand Canyon states expected to draw lavish attention and a fortune worth of advertising over the next year. Visiting last month, Pence, who nobody cares about, said he and Trump are going to be in and out of Arizona lots. Being in and out of Arizona won't help them very much at all. The ancestral home of the Republican Party icon, Barry Goldwater, and John McCain. Well, John McCain hated DJ Trump. Arizona has undergone a slow but steady transformation. The growing Latino population, flood of newcomers from places like California, rode Republican long-standing hegemony. The movement has been accelerated by Trump and his alienation of voters in typical Republican suburbs, Scottsdale, Gilbert, and Mesa. A lot of baseball training camps there, drawn from far-fledged satellites of Phoenix into the state's third largest city. Didn't know that. And of course, the president has plenty of supporters amidst the landscape and red tinted roofs of the region, sprawling the Horizon suburbs, including some like Sarah Rook, who came around after initial skepticism. She has worked more, Rook said, thanks to percolating economy, bringing home more pay as a result of tax bills signed. Well, she spent that a long time ago. I'm presently surprised. She's a flight attendant. Okay, well, that explains it. And somebody named Sally Wong, she's 65 years old, but she's a retired health executive who is a part-time web designer from home now. She's but this very explosive rhetoric is very effective to stop the toxic political power, the metastasizing political power that the Democrats, even more left of Obama, represent this time. That's what Wong has to say. And we have somebody else, Flake Thompson, chimed in sarcastic. We have no moral compass, but we have a conservative judges. She's the brother of Jeff Flake. Thompson, 41, nurse, said her feelings about the president have nothing to do with his attack on her kin and others in the family. Strongly support Trump, making for some lively discussions. This is interesting. Neither lapsed Republicans have decided on 2020. The youthful mayor of South Bend, black and self-described conservative, said that she could even vote in good conscience, I'm not sure who black is, for Elizabeth Warren with her vision of vastly expanded federal government. We would still have our checks and balances, black said. She is, but doesn't really matter. I think right now the most important thing is to get those principles of democracy tied down and get that return to regular order, and then we'll worry about getting back to squabbling over conservative versus liberal. Let me just check and see who black is. Oh, Christine Black. She is a stay-at-home mother who abandoned the Republican Party and voted independent in 2016. I guess she voted for Jill Stein rather than support Trump. I want them to see in writing that these are things he's saying, and those are worth tax cuts to you. Well, that's a very good way to put it. There's no doubt about that, and that kind of leaves in a hole, so to speak. One of the many things out there. I think we talked about this, but as we wind down the broadcast here, those free and innocent-looking USB charging ports that can rob you blind. These are the public accessible ones. It's called juice jacking, which may sound, this in the LA Times also. Catherine Ham, she's a travel editor, is a toddling sipping a cup of a playmate's hand. But this is a very grown-up problem unless your kid is already using a mobile phone. The juice jacking is a devious process by which bad guys, they could be good guys, hijack a public USB charging port and use it to steal your information from your phone. You can enter any mobile phone through a charging port. That is one of the ways of, now you know one of the secrets. Anyway, the same ports that you believe to find when your electronic device is on, you relieve to find when it's on low power and becomes a cause for worry. This isn't a new problem, experts say, but it has returned to the radar because of the LA District Attorney's Office recently warning unsuspecting users about criminals who load malware into charging ports. One of the newest schemes out here, and plugging them into stations so they can infect the phones and other electronic devices on unsuspecting users. This isn't a new, which is an issue. It's not because it's the time of year when travel is up, but because many of us rely on these charges to get through a long day of travel. That is from Ron Culler, Senior Director of Technology and Solutions at, of all places, ADT, who used to make burglar alarms, longtime home security customer. Oh, that's okay. Anyway, they're into cybersecurity now, I suppose. Anyway, and here I was, a polyandish, yes, that's the word, of thinking those ports in airports, on planes, in coffee shops were just good old-fashioned human kindness, etc. Very kind at all. I'm guilty of these. I'm guilty of one more, charging my phone whenever I can open a port. I vaguely recall doing that before a recent flight and never gave it another thought, no doubt about that. We buy airline tickets on our favorite carrier, but because it's easy, we leave our credit card information on the site so we can don't have to re-enter it each time, and we set up house payments using banks' bill pay service. We buy barbecue grills on a commuter bus using Wi-Fi on the bus. Yeah, that's a good idea, but you need to have some sort of protection there. And from LifeLock, which monitors my account, my information has appeared on a dark web. There were recent small dollar donations from my small dollar deductions, my bank account. It took me a month to notice, because I told myself after these interviews, this is good. And despite pressing good cyber hygiene, a new word out there, I mean, other than the $5,000 in plane tickets someone charged to my credit card 3 years ago. That can happen. That's interesting. They could charge, I guess, go pick your tickets up, and way to go. Anyway, these evildoers know you are an easy target when you're traveling. That is from Mike Baramio. He's at security, which shreds. Anyway, this is the document is destruction is part. You're in a hurry. Anyway, consequence of some lapses may lead to co-opted identification. And we'll end this article here. Besides avoiding these alluring charging ports, you can thaw data fees by using a regular plug-in outlet. I carry one of those around all the time. Your own charging cable. Also carry a spare battery charger with you. Do that anyway, just in case your flight's delayed or you're left your map app, and it sucks the life from your phone. Anyway, very good idea to always have one of these, or you can have what's called a block that has that's something you charge and it will hold the energy. There's also these case type devices that you can put on the phone. There are many more questions in the modern days out there. Nonetheless, we'll see you on the Monday morning quarterback on Monday morning. And I don't know, maybe we'll try to get an open source report together if we can. We'll do that also. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on Monday morning. This is Boston Red and the Jerry Pippin Memorial Broadcast Booth. Good day.